Mr. Holmes is the most twee film ever set to a reel. It is so twee, it has a spot in the film for taking tea. It is so twee that if they still made DVDs of small budget films like this, the cover would be a hand-stitched leather binding with a tasteful and immeasurably soft to the touch tartan inlay that would smell like an old bookshop and freshly baked butter biscuits. It is so twee. It's considering enlisting with the British Imperial Expeditionary Forces as a jolly swell way to spend its gap year, having an adventure with its best mates. Based on the novel A Slight Trick of the Mind by Mitch Cullen, is the story of a long-retired and deteriorating Sherlock Holmes, living out his last years in the countryside, following the Second World War, as the formerly world's greatest detective struggles to maintain his mental faculties and uncover the secrets lost in his memory concerning his final case. The most dramatic moment in this film is when the child of his live-in housekeeper is stung by a wasp. The kid is played by Milo Parker, who, when I chose to include this film, I misremembered as being Thomas Brody's sangster. But by the time I checked and discovered this, I had written about half the script and was in no mood to have to find another movie to include. So I hastily rewatched it until Roger Allen popped up, playing Sherlock's long-suffering personal physician. Because British media is wildly incestuous, and so here we are. As mentioned, the dramatic climax of the film sees the child stung by some wasps, who had invaded the territory of a bee colony Holmes kept out back. That had become much of Holmes' chief concern in life. And Sherlock and his put-upon housekeeper must nurse the child back to health, which teaches Holmes not to be such a grumpy old bastard all the time, and to dare to both hope and instill hope. This coincides with his attempts to pen a corrective memoir to detail the truth behind John Watson's fictionalized stories, unable to remember the conclusion to his final case except for a nagging sense of a hidden failure and a greater loss, exemplified by a recent flashback sequence of Holmes traveling to Japan, collecting a rare plant to treat his dementia that grew only in the then still ashes of Hiroshima. This film is small, contained, and absolutely wonderful, and among the greatest performances of Ian McKellen's career, as he portrays the detective at 3 different points in his later days, showing his deterioration in stark detail, aging years more through his own performance than makeup and effects. If you have any love for tea and crumpets, this film is for you. Oh, Terminator Genisys, what are we supposed to do with you? It's not your fault that you ended up like you did. The fall of the Terminator franchise has been slow and weird. From Judgment Day undermining the fundamental fatalism of the original, to Rise of the Machines recorrecting that newfound optimism, all while wearing rhinestone Elton John glasses, and dropping pop culture references that were horribly dated even for then. With the re-inevitability of Judgment Day came Salvation, a presumptuous next step into the war against the machines that could have been decent, had it not panicked when the ending was spoiled, and hastily rewritten a new, much lamer one. Salvaging what they could from that came Genisys, the Terminator franchise's equivalent of the fuck it button, tossing the property into the deep end of self-aware multi-dimensional warfare and not bothering to check to see if it came up for air. I love the idea of Terminator Genisys, because on the surface it is a love letter to sci-fi and Terminator fans. Arnold is back, and with a bit more character to chew on this time. Sarah Connor's back and is the protagonist. And someone that the movie says is Kyle Reese appears and steals some sneakers from a department store in the 80s. There's even a T-1000 and the Dyson family. And we finally get to see the end of the war and the time machine mentioned but never shown since the beginning of the series 35 years ago. Plus some new elements, like a personified Skynet and a Terminator John Connor. There's even a bit of fantastic counter-type casting, with Smith being revealed to be the avatar of a much larger Skynet than ever encountered before, one that campaigns across multiple timelines at once, manipulating events and previous outcomes until the audience is presented with an intentionally broken timeline, the work of an evil robot Time Lord. God damn did I want this movie to work, and for the most part, it does, so long as you aren't afraid of the heights between all these leaps the film makes you take. Unfortunately, with Arnold condemned to crouching moron hidden badass, and Jai Courtney eating any spare on-screen charisma the franchise had left, All the dramatic heavy lifting is left to the Mother of Dragons, Emilia Clarke. While many will often and loudly complain about Emilia's acting ability, both on and off Game of Thrones, I think her portrayal fails due more to bad writing and terrible casting. Aside from Lena Headey's terrific but short-lived television portrayal, Sarah Connor hasn't been seen by audiences since 1994, and it seems that the Genisys writers lost her somewhere among the more modern tropes of female-led sci-fi. Emilia Clarke is no Linda Hamilton, who instilled a fierce defiance into the character, taking her from the hunted to a hunter, a person focused on the mission and only the mission, and a person who very much would appear to the rest of society to be violently mentally ill. She is the exact same character as Ellen Ripley, as portrayed in the first two Alien films. Someone hunted, then haunted, exhausted by inevitability, but driven not to be bowed by it. You can't cast Emilia Clarke for that sort of role, and you can't make Genisys' daddy's girl version work even if Linda Hamilton was playing it. The character simply had no gravitas, where literally every other portrayal beforehand did, including a coffin stuffed with guns. Sarah Connor is the pillar around which the Terminator franchise was built, and it simply collapsed under the strain into self-parody when the characters were played for one too many laughs. Which is probably why Hamilton's return for Dark Fate, which will erase everything since T2, looks about as humorous and fun-loving as a tactical nuclear strike. What a wonderfully timely excuse to talk about Marvel Studios' Infinity War, starring Peter Dinklage, the heroic tale of the last of the really quite large cosmic dwarven Smiths who, after losing his family, friends, and co-workers to the Mad Titan, decided to take a stand and no-handedly reignited a dead star to build the Axe of the Gods that some blonde idiot failed to use properly. Endgame has been out for all of 4 days, and already people are writing op-eds about how Infinity War pales in comparison to the possibly perfect conclusion. Because it's kinda true. But that's hardly fair, because since when has the setup ever been as good as the payoff? And as far as I'm concerned, Infinity War is one of the greatest story setups of all time, creating enormous stakes and a collective feeling of loss from an outcome that was both known to many in the audience, and to those who, even if it wasn't, could not rationally be believed by the rest, due to the nature of the movie business and the tropes of comic book movie death. It's a mark of showmanship to make an audience care about something they know for a fact doesn't ultimately matter within the story itself. The deaths of these characters, such as Peter Parker's touching moment, is entirely contrived and will be reversed by the end of the whole story, long before it actually affects these characters in their own rights. In almost any other situation, a no-stakes scenario does not draw in audiences, let alone the most audiences. But the contrivances are a feature of these characters by nature of the medium that bore them, not a bug. And that willful kayfabe from the audience is why it's been such a wild success compared to other genres. I have no idea what the future holds for these films, or how long it can be sustained, or what the studio has planned for them in the long run. But I really hope that wasn't the last we saw of Eitri, King of the Dwarves, or his enormous cosmic forge.